Hello and welcome, social media practitioners. This is David with special guest Thomas Messett here to talk about best practices in the post 2.0 web. We are currently live on YouTube, Ustream, YouNow, Periscope, Meerkat, StreamUp, and Rabbit. We are on 7 different social networking sites, streaming services. So that's how we like to begin most of the shows. I'd like to go over a few items of feedback before I introduce our guest. Gage Castillo from Slice of the Net messaged me and said, I really want to get back into podcasting because of your show. Honestly, it hit me to do my own thing again after I listened to episode 1 of Beyond Tweeting. Your energy and efforts really hit me, and I wanted to use the help. I wanted to be able to help others in the same way. You may not notice it now, but you are influencing people, and that is powerful. Thank you very much, Gage. He has his own podcast called Team Slice Podcast from sliceofthee.net. Okay, quick question for you, Tom. Do you have headphones you could wear? Because I think I'm hearing myself coming out of your speakers.
I don't. I'm afraid my headphones have literally got broken at the weekend. I'm really sorry. If you need me to put me on mute while you're talking, I'll mute myself. Let's try.
Okay, well, up until I introduce you, but while we're talking, obviously don't mute me. I think we'll be able to deal with it. Okay. Thank you very much to @Jimbo Ireland on Twitter for the 5-star review of my book on Amazon. A great work by a great guy. A real insight and lesson for all. David Kimball is a man of knowledge. Thank you, Jimbo. Really appreciate that review. Goes a long way. And the last piece of feedback I'm going to share is I had the privilege to speak to students visiting from Mexico, known as the Proyecta 100,000 at Northwest University. I was able to talk about social media and practices in the United States, and it was a lot of fun. I would love to go again sometime. So now to today's topic. Let's launch right into it. It's all about how do large companies like Microsoft and Nokia handle their social media campaigns and initiatives? Today's guest is Thomas Messett, who has lots of experience in digital campaign planning, social media strategy, and community management. Tom, thank you for being on the show today.
You're welcome, David. A pleasure.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
All right. So I've worked for Microsoft and before that Nokia, who Microsoft obviously purchased a large part of, for about 4 years. I actually very recently left Microsoft, not related to the announcements made recently, but of my own making, to go into the startup world and join a travel tech company called Avivo. So I've been now doing that for a couple of weeks. Before Microsoft, I worked in a couple of different marketing agencies and for some social media technology providers, one being Radian6, who were purchased by Salesforce a couple of years ago. So I've been on a few different sides of the marketing fence, big budgets, small budgets, agencies, tool vendors. So yeah, I've been around the social media block, I think it would be fair to say.
No kidding. And it's great because you've gone from big to startup. And like you mentioned, everywhere in between. So you probably have a really good grasp of social media practices and how a variety of different businesses and companies use it. So talk about your time at university and that was earlier on, and how that shaped or how it was influential and what you wanted to do with your career.
Sure. So uni, I studied at the University of East Anglia in Norwich, which is kind of, I guess, a good mid-tier university in the UK. I actually studied history. I studied history just purely because I enjoyed it. There was no kind of like, I want to be a historian, I want to get into any particular career. I liked it at school, I was good at it, and I did it at uni. It taught me a hell of a lot about how to approach different things that have been really, really useful to me in my career since. Much as everyone likes to think that businesses, like particularly large businesses like Microsoft, are kind of rational entities that do the right thing based on lots and lots of data, they're just giant arguments. The best way to genuinely think of a large business is a series of different political battles and arguments occurring in different places at different times. So knowing how to put an argument forward in the absence of good data, and also knowing how to be cynical about data and how to look at sources, look at insight, and see the insight behind a statement or a graph or a piece of qualitative research, which for anyone who knows is basically just a written or recorded statement from a person of interest or influence, a target consumer or a blogger or somebody. Being able to see that, which history really teaches you, is really, really valuable. But mostly university gave me an opportunity to do a number of different things. It gave me an opportunity to meet really diverse people. I live with guys who are now working in finance, some who are now working for other big telecoms companies, and one guy who's a teacher in Japan now. And having that breadth of exposure to just different people, different thoughts, that's really important for someone who wants to go into a creative industry. Creativity is fueled by stimulus and influences. And so having a broad set of influences and being able to assimilate a broad set of influences is really important.
Yeah. Wow. So then how did you decide from having your degree in history that you wanted to go into social media? What did that path look like?
That was a long and winding path. So I left university and I fell into sales. I think it's really common for that to happen to people who leave uni because, there's two things. One, sales jobs always have these really high OTE incomes they put on the advert. So you're going to earn $60,000, $80,000 in your first year. You said, no, you're not. Nobody does that. Maybe one guy ever has done that. But, when you're 21 and you're a bit fresh, that gets you. So it got me. And I ended up working for a recruitment consultancy. And to cut a long story short, I drifted through a couple of different sales jobs. I wasn't very good at sales, being honest. I can sell in the sense of I can sell an idea in a room, but cold calling 200 people a day to try and get a meeting, that's hard. And it wasn't for me. I know some guys who've done it and are really, really good at it, and more power to them. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do. It's not for me. So from there, I ended up working for a company who sell marketing agencies. And what these guys do, they were called Rainmaker, and they positioned themselves in a lot of different ways. But what they really were was an outsourced cold calling company. And so what they would do is they would phone up people like me now on behalf of a marketing agency. They pretend to be from that marketing agency, and they try and get a meeting with me. And the marketing agencies would pay them a lot of money to do that job, because that the marketing agency's lifeblood is new clients, and these guys would get new clients. What that taught me, this was 2008, and that just taught me this incredible lesson, which is I had 10 different clients I worked on over my time there. I had corporate reporting, design, traditional digital agencies, big ad and branding agencies like Landor, and there was one agency, a small little social media agency, and all those other agencies, I'd call 100 people basically to get a couple of meetings. This social media agency, I call 10 people and get 6 meetings.
Wow.
And what I realized back in that time was holy crap, this is taking off. This is taking off in a big way. And I then got a bit lucky, and this is a perverse thing to say, but I got made redundant. The company that I was in, they got into trouble in the recession of 2008-9, and I got pushed out. And that's funny. I said that's lucky, but it was genuinely, career-wise, probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. My wife would kill me if I said it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Obviously, career-wise, it was. So getting made redundant, or losing my job there, and I literally had a couple of weeks' pay. I was renting a room in a flat in London. I was panicking, and I just remembered, hold on, this social media company, they were getting. I could call anyone, and they'd want to meet about that. So I phoned a few of their competitors and just said, hey, I've worked for this company. I've got hot leads because I've worked for them. I know what I'm doing. I know a bit about your industry now. Give me a shot. And one of them, a company called Radian 6, they gave me a shot. And they said, okay, come in and give it a go. And I actually took a pay cut to do that. And it was just the best thing I ever did because I got in on the ground floor. I was talking about this when literally nobody knew what was going on. This was 2009, remember? And the books hadn't been written yet. So we were making this up as we went along, and that just gave me a hell of a growth path because I just had the early experience. The And so I did some sales for them for a while, then I drifted into account management, and then I drifted into community management from there, and moved on to an agency. But it was, that was the luck. The luck was perverse in that it was getting made redundant, and it was sort of seeing that as the opportunity that it was, and also it was not chasing the money. And it was funny, I was talking to this about a colleague of mine today. It's like, as soon as I stopped chasing the big OTE incomes and the big commission incomes and all those silly things, that's when I actually started to do the things that built the groundwork for me to actually earn real money and do a job that I really, really love. Because I was able to, focus on other things. And, I was offered a job when I was unemployed between losing that job at Rainmaker and something else. When I was offered 2 jobs. One was basically doing the same job I did at Rainmaker for a different company at the same thing, but paying me more money. And the other was this social media company who were offering me a load less money. And I was very lucky, and I had some really good advice at the time, which was no, never do the thing for the money, do the thing that you want to do. And I did the thing I wanted to do, and it worked really well for me.
Interesting. Now that's a big, we've talked about this on the show before, is this struggle between, do you do the thing that you love, or like, to what degree do you do the thing that you love? Like, do you go on the brink of bankruptcy to make it happen? And so I feel like you have some valuable insights into that, but you said it was the most valuable thing you ever did. So that's well, I mean, career-wise, let's be clear so your wife doesn't get mad at you. So, all right, so let me ask you then, what are all the different types of roles you've had in social media? Like, what are the different job titles you've had?
Okay, well, so I started off as I guess they call me an account manager, but I was really a salesperson, and that was inside Radian 6. And that was a really good job. That was basically, a mixture of selling, of following up leads, of cold calling, of taking meetings, of selling the product in, but then once it was sold in, handing these people through it. This was, like I said, this was early days, and people didn't really understand what social media was or did, and we were selling a quite advanced product that really helped them understand it. So it needed a lot of hand-holding. That moved into community executive, or then sort of community manager, which was then managing community. So back in 2010, I took over Nokia's Facebook page and Twitter ID.
Wow.
And we built a team around that, running some of the Nokia blogs that would eventually become Nokia Conversations. I worked on with a lot of other people. I can't ever take credit for how good that was. But that was part of what we worked on. I worked on a load of other projects there as kind of community manager, and then kind of senior community manager, sort of running a team. When I moved into Nokia as a permanent employee inside Nokia, so that was my agency job, I was then made kind of editor-in-chief for social media. And that was a weird scenario where my old boss, Craig, who was a good guy, he just said to me, look, you need a job title that makes sense for what you're actually going to do, but I don't really know what it's going to be, so kind of you just choose it. So I sort of said, well, editor-in-chief really works because it gives me editorial control. And this was kind of an early phase of this whole brands being publishers thing. And it was kind of like that gave me control to say, no, I'm an editor. It means I can say no. It means I can stop people. Because the big problem with social media is, anyone can be a publisher. That's not always a good thing.
Right.
Not when you're a brand. I'll give you an example. When we were at Nokia in 2011, there was this guy, I can't remember his name, and he looked after, he was a product manager for Nokia Messaging. And Nokia Messaging was basically Nokia's email client. Like it's a Outlook Exchange and all that email client, IMAP and POP3 and all that stuff. And Nokia Messaging, though, was an internal name. It's what we called it as Nokia, but it wasn't what you were meant to call it as a consumer.
Okay.
But this guy just went on Twitter one day and created Nokia Messaging, at Nokia Messaging. And then he created an at Nokia Messaging on Facebook and on a few other places as well. And he started tweeting people and talking to people and amassing followers and answering care questions and all this stuff. And so what you ended up with very quickly was this kind of consumer brand of Nokia Messaging that the company didn't want to exist.
Yikes.
But we had no control over it. This was like before I'd taken a job at Nokia. And so one of my first jobs was kind of like come in and sort of clean that up. And that's where kind of the arguments kind of came in, and the ability to argue a point and defend yourself, and because that was very political. Like, this guy wasn't going to give up his baby, but also he was adding value, or he felt he was adding value to his boss through this thing. And more importantly, he was going to give me 10,000 reasons why that should continue to exist. So I had to give him reasons why it shouldn't, and I had to be better. And I had to understand that his argument wasn't an argument about should we have a Nokia messaging Twitter account. The answer was obviously no. His argument was about, you know, his own value and validity in the company and his own ideas. And so we had to work our way through a lot of issues there. So that's why I took editor-in-chief, because I wanted the ability to say, no, I'm the editor-in-chief. I say this, that's what it means. And have the backing from my bosses, which fortunately I did, to when I said something, it mattered. So yeah, after that I became head of digital marketing for Europe. So that was a big move, and I kind of made a decision towards the end of 2012 that, you know, I was kind of enjoying social media, but I needed to get a broader understanding. You know, social is important, but it exists in a much bigger ecosystem, and as the world evolves more and more, social is a much smaller part of a much bigger thing, which is digital. And I'll give you an example of that. One of the things I did in Europe was looked at kind of search results. Now, how are search results social? Well, actually, it's bloody easy to work out how search results are social. Because if you Google Lumia 930 review, look at the top 10 results, at least 6 of them are blogs. Well, that's social, my friend. So and they're the ones that get all the clicks. Because no one clicks on, you know, Microsoft.com to look at Lumia 930. They click on the blogs first. When they've decided they want to buy it, they click on Microsoft to just see the tech details and how much it costs and all that kind of thing. So to understand then how social and search integrate and how we can use social and we can use these different channels to influence what appears in search and so on, that's a really important play, and that's a really big integration play. And I wanted to understand and learn about that kind of thing, understand and learn about the wider mix. After that, I ran digital creative. So that was basically the digital campaigns. So you probably saw the April Fool's Day campaign we did this year. So that was that was me. My ugly face has got 1 million views on YouTube, which is quite fun. And we ran a number of different campaigns like that. You know, Microsoft had a 3 campaign a year strategy that I worked to. And now obviously I've moved to Avivo, and I'm kind of chief digital officer there. So I report to the CEO. I sit on the management team of the company. You know, I'm and our CEO, obviously being a forward-thinking young company, they've put digital kind of above marketing in the sense we have a marketing person, but they don't sit on the board. Or so they don't sit on the management team. It's the digital guy who sits on the management team. And
Wow.
that I think was a really interesting. When I walked into that, I didn't realise that would be the dynamic, and I thought that was a really, really interesting decision. But yeah, that's kind of where I am now.
Wow. Well, Tom, I have to say, obviously, as a Microsoft Nokia fan, I've been heavily engaged with and a part of the fan page Twitter account culture. And of all the posts I've seen from Nokia about Lumia, about whatever it may have been, I've only seen rabid comments of loyalty. Like everyone's saying, "I love you guys." Like it seems like no matter what you posted, it was a bunch of Nokia fans saying, "You guys are the best. Keep posting stuff like this." And so, what? I mean, like, were you saying these are the kind of posts we should be posting, or like, what was your role in getting the actual posts there?
For part of my career, yeah. For part of my career, I was literally writing. So this is something that I'm quite passionate about. So I feel that, like, you know, brands have drifted into this territory of brand personalities, right? Where basically, for a while, everyone sort of said social media is about being human. And then brands kind of realized, had this glum realization that they're not actually people. And upon realizing that, they tried to make personalities for themselves. And some of them did it really well. A good example for the UK is Betfair Poker, who are an online gambling brand that target 20-something males. They do an incredible job of humanizing their Twitter account with comedy. Some do it really badly, and I would say kind of Nokia kind of fell somewhere in the middle of really good and really bad. But what we did do was we very quickly simplified the process for getting a tweet out the door. And so what we said was, I remember sitting down with my community manager at the time after I'd been promoted to kind of head of, and sitting with her and saying, look, what's the process for getting a tweet out the door? And this is called lean process improvement methodology, by the way, but it's really very, very simple. Don't ever let big names or big words bamboozle you. Lean is basically you draw everything on a whiteboard and then you delete the things that don't make sense. So what we did with that was we drew you this diagram of like what the process was from when I said to her I wanted something to be tweeted to when it got tweeted. And we realized there were like 10 steps. And I was like, okay, but then what's the thing? If I wanted to tweet something from my personal account, what's the steps? And she was like, well, you just tweet it, wouldn't you? I was like, yeah, but like, you speak English. Why can't you just tweet it? And she was like, why do you need all these 9 other steps? And so we got rid of a lot of the complexity. We got rid of having a big agency who ran the account for us. We brought it internally. We got rid of trying to spend loads and loads of money on photography for the page, and we kind of reduced it down to having a person internally who did photography for us. He did a very good job. He was a very premium photographer, but he worked for us. We got rid of having strict, rigid content calendars because we knew when there were big events, right? We know when MWC is. We know when you know, IFA is. We know when Apple are going to announce a phone. You know, apart from like 10 things in a year, it doesn't really matter. Like, it doesn't matter if that tweet gets posted on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. It just has to go out roughly at the right time. And speed is often then more important than other things. So we were able to just move really, really fast. And that allowed us to just be really reactive. And so my job in one day was, yeah, writing the copy. But mostly at that point, my job was building a team that was capable and empowered to do good work. And making sure we had the right people and the right processes and the right sense of empowerment. So they felt like they could do things. You know, there's this phrase that someone said to me once, like, stop asking permission until someone says no. And so, because what people would do in big companies, and it's a really big thing to fall into, is people are afraid to act. And so what they do is they keep asking different people for their permission. And eventually you'll find someone who will tell you can't do it. So we kind of instilled a bit of a culture of, well, don't ask permission. Like, ask for forgiveness. Like, know what the brand is, know what it stands for, so you know that you don't do things that are off-brand, and then just go out and do stuff. And we used to have this saying of, for God's sake, it's only a tweet. Which is like, well, what's the worst that can happen? If we don't do anything really stupid, we're kind of okay. And, you know, that's where stuff like that kind of culture and that protection was where stuff like the Apple imitation flattery tweet came from, which I think is still one of the most retweeted tweets ever.
I was just going to ask you about that.
Okay, so that one was when I was running Europe, and the team that did that was the UK team, and I can't take credit for the creative. They did that, but what I did was I went to my whole team, the whole Europe marketing team, Germany, UK, France, Italy, everybody, the day before, or 2 days before, and I said, guys, look, we know that on Wednesday Apple are going to announce the iPhone 5 and the iPhone 5C. We know that's coming because it's all leaked. We know that so we know we've got 3 or 4 angles of attack, like things we can say. We can make fun of it being gold. We can make fun of the colours thing. And there's a few other ones. We have lack of innovation, lack of NFC, da-da-da-da. And so I was like, so each of you pick one and come up with a couple of ideas. And if any of you get more than 5,000 retweets, I'll buy you a bottle of champagne. I was like, and by the way, I'll protect you. If it all goes wrong, just say it was my idea. So then they had kind of carte blanche that they knew they would get the credit if they did good, but they wouldn't get punished if they did bad.
Wow.
And that's how you get the best work out of people, because, you know, you take away that fear and then you get real creativity. And so the UK team came up with this imitation thing, and because we knew it was coming and because they knew they had the power to do it, we had the tweet written in our Twitter, like, you know, publishing tool, ready to go. So as soon as Tim Cook came on stage and as soon as he pulled that blue phone out of his pocket, before he'd even raised it to his head, basically, we tweeted. So we were the very first. And so we had this combination of momentum and like momentum driven by speed and really good creative. And that's all you need. And we didn't put any media money behind that. We didn't do anything else and nothing clever. And I went home and it had like 1,000 retweets, and I got an email from the girl saying, "Hey Tom, this is great, 1,000 retweets." Selena Harrington was her name. And then by the time I got home, I got another text saying, "Check your Twitter," and it had 7,000 retweets. I kept refreshing my Twitter feed, and every time I refreshed, it went up again, like another 500. And then, yeah, by the next morning, we'd got to like 40,000 or something.
Oh my goodness! Congratulations! I just want to say, bravo.
Thank you. yeah, that was a fun time. But my job really, and it was about building the culture and the community and the team ethos that allowed these people who are actually much smarter and more creative than me in many occasions to thrive and do cool stuff.
That is so cool. Thank you for sharing that. I remember watching that April Fool's Day deal, and I think you updated, or not you, whoever was in charge of the page, updated the cover photo first before the video went out. So I saw that. I jumped on WinFan. I did something similar, and then as soon as the video came out, it was like part of a tweet or something. So I went to the actual original video, left a comment, shared it, pushed it out all over the place, and then you added me on LinkedIn. Actually, I think it was, and you look familiar, but I couldn't really tell why. So I messaged you, and at some point you said, we met up for coffee because you were in Seattle, and you said, "Oh yeah, I was the guy that did the MS DOS
Yeah.
on a mobile thing," and I was like, "That's why you look familiar, because I just saw your face."
So that one was a funny story. So that came from like actually a challenge. So I don't know if there's a guy Rob what's his name, Rob Wolf, who works for Microsoft. You may know him. He's head of social.
Sorry, can you say that again?
His name, the guy called Rob Wolf, who works for Microsoft.
Yeah.
He's a good guy. I only ever met him once, like in person, but he was like the kind of like PR side head of social media. And we were emailing back and forth with the Microsoft team in Redmond from London, talking about different events that were coming up. And April Fool's Day came up, and I sort of said, "Hey guys, what can we do for April Fool's Day? Let's work together and do a big thing." And Rob sort of challenged us and said, "Oh, by all means do something, but it's going to be really hard because Google always really bring their A game, and so do some other brands. It's going to be really noisy. Like, let's think about this." And generally, I always agree with him. And the year before, I'd actually stopped us doing things on April Fool's Day because we didn't have any good ideas, and I said, "Look, let's just not." But this year, me and the guy Rick, who I work with, just decided, we've got to do something. It's our first year as Microsoft employees. We want to make a dent. Let's make an impact. Let's do something fun. And it's a big year for Microsoft. Let's really try something clever here. And that's where the idea of like playing on Microsoft's heritage, playing on DOS came from. And we thought we don't want to just be one of those other brands who makes a video that's kind of funny and puts it out, like everyone does every year. We wanted to take the Google model of let's actually do something. So we thought, well, what if we just actually made it? We actually made DOS for Windows Phone work. And so that's when we got the idea, and we got a developer who we knew to go and sort of start playing with it. And the great thing there was, again, it's that cultural thing that the developers loved the idea, so they kept making it better, and they kept adding new things to the app and saying, hey, we can do this as well. That's when we got ASCII camera, and hey, we can do this, and we got a game, and hey, we can do this. And our agencies loved it, so they were pitching in lots of good ideas, and the team loved it. So that's why the team of people who ended up in the video were actually some of the people behind the idea, and some other random people who just wanted to be in the video. And so you got this really kind of great collaboration of all of these people. So it's just like having that culture of doing good stuff and wanting to do good stuff, and it really paid off.
Yeah, that's so neat. I still have it on my phone. It's a work of brilliance. Anyway, so that was a super fun. So, I mean, maybe you just touched on it, but in your opinion, out of all the social media campaigns you've been a part of, from the beginning steps of thinking about ideas to looking at data to implementing and all that, what would you consider the most successful campaign you have ever run, and then why?
Wow, that's a really big question. So, I mean, I won't go into all of the details of how do you define a campaign and all that stuff, because you can go on a lot. Like, would you call the DOS thing a campaign? It was really just a one-day thing. Would you call the tweet thing a campaign that we did, the iPhone tweet? Again, it was really just a one thing. It was part of a bigger strategy, but it was just one thing. I would say, like, campaign success-wise, there are a few different ones that I could talk about. I'll talk about them from two perspectives. I'll talk about one that's from a pure, like, ROI perspective. I'll talk about another one that's more from a kind of like a creative fulfillment perspective. So from the creative perspective, I think there was a campaign we ran called Vimeo Shorts. And this was back in 2010 for the Nokia N8. And the idea was we partnered with Vimeo. And the Nokia N8 was one of the first great camera phones. It was a really 12 megapixel camera, really great. It was the first camera phone you could really do proper video on. And so we challenged a load of filmmakers, like short filmmakers, to actually make a one-off film on a Nokia camera, just on a Nokia camera. And this was unheard of at the time. This was back when most, like 80% of the population, was still using dumb phones. And so these guys went and did it, and we got some of this incredible content out of it. I mean, genuinely, like stuff that was good enough that you could put it on a cinema screen. And the release that we did for it, we released it in PR, we released it in across social, across digital, and just the reaction to these films, because they were so creatively good, was amazing. We ended up on the Wall Street Journal, we ended up on national TV in places like New Zealand, we ended up in papers and newspapers and magazines and radio all over the world. And then all of the digital and social love that came back. Each one of these winning videos, the 8 that won it, each one got millions of views on Vimeo and on the web. And the thing that was great about that was, creatively, it was incredibly fulfilling. It really landed that product and what that product was about. But it also kept on giving. So that months later, we'd be getting requests or discussion coming up to us about on Facebook or via email about those videos, from journalists, from people who wanted to display them. The people who made the videos, the directors, they were entering them into awards all around the world, like months and years later, because they were so good.
Wow.
So the payoff of that was great. From a pure ROI perspective, I think that there's this kind of often looked thing which I touched on earlier, which is the kind of the confluence of search and social. And I think you can look at all the big, crazy creative campaigns like Vimeo Shorts or other ones I can touch on. The work that we did around 3D printing was pretty incredible as well. But from a pure ROI perspective, the stuff that's the most effective that I've ever been involved with is using social and using social advocate campaigns and so on to influence search. And it's really simple, right? So people talk about social media and they say, oh, what did let's talk about what was said. Let's talk about what this reviewer wrote, what this blogger wrote, what this person wrote. That's all irrelevant. What you say is utterly irrelevant. What matters is what other people read. And the two things are not the same. I can honestly tell you there are 3 bloggers who really matter in the United Kingdom. They're CNET, TechRadar, and Trusted Reviews. Because consistently, whatever term you search for on Google in the United Kingdom, they're the guys who rank 1, 2, and 3. And TechRadar are the best. They rank 1 most of the time. And what that means is, if I win with TechRadar, I win full stop. Because the average consumer on the street doesn't go off page 1. So all I have to do is win there. Now, how do I win there? Well, I don't win there by just throwing money at it or by having them front row center at our press conferences. I've got to map the bloggers who are on TechRadar, who are writing for them, and I've got to figure out, well, who are they following? Who are they interacting with? Who's influencing the influencer? And I've got to engage with those people. And I've got to engage with the blogger. And I've got to engage with everybody else. And the other thing that's really underrated is reviews like carphonewarehouse.com in the UK, or that would be like the equivalent of Walmart in the US, or like Target. They have review sections on their site. Now, again, in the UK, and I'm going to speak to the UK market because it's one that I know really well, Carphone Warehouse always ranked really, really highly. And people click on Carphone Warehouse and they read the reviews, like 5-star, 4-star, 3.5-star, all that stuff. So on those review sections, I don't just need to have 5 stars. I need to have 5 stars and I need to have quantity. Now, why do I need quantity? Because if you have 5 stars but you only have 3 reviews, you're socially devalidated. Because consumers, you've probably done this, I've done this. Consumers think, oh, it's only got 3 reviews, not many people are buying it. They might not even think that consciously, but that's what comes into their mind. So I need to get my fans to review my product on Carphone Warehouse. And that's more valuable to me than having my fans write things on Twitter. Because that's the thing that gets read. And that gets read by people at the point of need, people who are actually going to buy. So we did a lot of programs working with this company called LinkDex in Europe when I was running digital there, around understanding what were the bloggers that mattered, what were the retailers and other online sites, review sites that mattered. In Italy, Amazon.com really mattered. In Russia, it was a completely different local site. In the UK and France and Germany, it was normally a mixture of retailers and bloggers. It was different in all these different markets. But by understanding that, we could attack those efforts really, really focused. At that point was really when Nokia was running out of money. And it was running out of money real fast. And so we didn't have the money to just punch toe-to-toe with a Samsung. But we could, by being laser focused, we could win strategic battles. And from an ROI perspective and an impact perspective, that's some stuff I'm really, really proud of, because that was strategic and that was making a dent. But the creative stuff is great, and I do believe in it. I wouldn't have done so much of it if I didn't. But that tactical stuff is so important too, and it's not the stuff that everyone always wants to do, but it's actually really exciting when you get into it.
Yeah. Wow. That is an amazing insight. I know, even to make it like 10 times more simplified, on Twitter, if you want more followers, start following, like, think about your niche, follow the head honchos, and then look at the people that are following those head honchos and follow those people. You're going to get really great follow back potential because they're all related. And people don't think about that. And it's all right in front of them already. It's like, well, I tweet stuff and nothing happens and no one follows me. Well, there's already like lists of people that are probably interested in whatever you're talking about. Find the lists and engage with those lists before you do anything else. That's how you can get a jump start.
And actually say something original. Like, if you go to that into Twitter, it's like the thing that gets me is how many people just follow. I mean, like, I don't have a great deal of followers. I have about 1,500 followers, but like people who just follow like other people and then just retweet what they say. There's nothing wrong with retweeting, Ben Evans, who's a great thinker on technology or so on. But like, have your own opinion. And actually do the work. Like, I mean, these guys don't get loads of followers because they're just naturally born insightful with 140 character pearls of wisdom dropping out of their backside. These guys do the work.
That's a great point. That's exactly right. And it's a combination of lose your entitlement mentality of I'm a brilliant person, everyone should follow me. Do the work of the tools in front of you and don't be lazy. Do the work of finding other people. And then thirdly, have a personality and write something that people would want to read, right? And so those three things, they're not easy, but honestly, they're not that hard either.
No, and bear in mind, it will take time. Like you're not gonna go from 100 to 1,000 followers in a week. It'll take years, but just stick at it. And if you're doing it because you're passionate about it and because you're passionate about what you're saying, you won't mind. If you're doing it because you want to get 1,000 followers or 10,000 followers, you're never going to get there. Don't chase the number.
Yeah, it'll be a very long year if you're doing it because you want the number. If you can find a way to work without thinking it's work, then it's an asset. If you're doing it because you want a number, it's going to be a chore. It's going to be another line of work. You're exactly right. So that's awesome. So as all the intangible benefits of social, and you mentioned some things earlier about ROI perspective versus creative perspective, how do you measure success in a social media initiative? Because it's not always tangible.
That's a really good question. So I talked about this quite a lot at Marketing Week conference recently, and what I sort of said there was obviously there is some stuff that's very tangible. Now, when you're looking at that SEO stuff, for example, that I mentioned earlier, so how social influencers search, I can reasonably accurately tell you how many people are going to click on each of those links. So if you look at the first page of Google, I can tell you pretty accurately, okay, that search term has about 100,000 searches per month. And of those 100,000 searches, I can guess that 20,000 people are going to click on the first link, or 50,000 are going to click the first link, 30,000 are going to hit the second or third link, and then it goes down from there. And because I can assess that, I can reasonably accurately assess the impact of having a positive or negative review as the first or second or third link. And from there, I can work out using a relatively simple mathematical model how much money it's costing me to have a negative review there, or how much money it's making me to have a positive review there. And there's your ROI. And I know exactly how much I am able to spend to effectively influence what goes there.
So the grand standard, in other words.
Yeah. So then when you're looking at the more, I guess, creative stuff, that's when you have to be smarter. And what you can't do is you can't analyze the ROI of April Fool's Day activity that we did. You can't do that. It's stupid and damaging to try. And I think that the quicker businesses realize that, the better. And then the same's true with that, even the really spectacularly successful stuff like that iPhone tweet thing that we did. It's like that. That was probably the most successful single tweet ever. I guarantee you it had no ROI. Because it's impossible to have ROI at that scale. Like when you're Microsoft, okay, or you're Nokia, the scale of level of impacts on your brand is huge. You know, people have a massive preconceived idea of what you are. There's all that legacy you're dealing with. Then there's distribution. You know, does the product that you want to buy exist in the stores you want to buy it in? Often it doesn't. Then there's pricing. Then there's the TV ads we're running. Then there's the billboard and print and all the other things we're running. And there's the other PR you read. Then there are those search results, etc., etc., etc. There's tons there's this myriad of factors in every single moment. So trying to prove an ROI on a single tweet or a single activity or a single day's work is just impossible. So don't try. What you can do, and what you're much better off doing, is trying to control the message in the long term. So I mean, I think it's a misquote of Aristotle, but you know, it's like we are what we repeatedly do. And the same is true for brands, and it's been true for brands forever. You know, and consistency pays off. You know, Jack Daniels are an incredibly consistent brand, and they win for that. Apple are an incredibly consistent brand, and they win for that. Inconsistent brands have inconsistent results. And so you can't judge one activity, but you can judge 100. So when you have an initiative, you've got to judge every output of that initiative, not just the successful ones, not just the big hero ones that got on the front page of Marketing Week or that got you invited to speak at a conference. You've got to judge the whole thing, and you've got to let that run for long enough, and you've got to let it permeate the organisation enough that it actually makes a difference. And that's an incredibly hard thing to do. When you're dealing with an organisation the size of even Nokia was before it got subsumed into Microsoft, you're dealing with the equivalent of a small town. And so it's trying to get all of those people in a small town pulling in the same direction. I mean, I bet you probably have trouble getting all the people in your house pulling in the same direction. So you can imagine how hard this is. So that's the challenge. But that's what you got to do. You can't measure an activity or an initiative. You can barely measure a campaign. What you can measure is scaled activity over time. Wow. And that's really the answer to that.
Yeah, and over time, like that'll depend on the size of the company. That'll depend on what field you're in, what your market is. There's so many factors, and it's not like
that's the other thing. When you're Nokia or Microsoft, you've got 1 billion customers. You know, so again, the scale is hard. When I'm at my current company now, we've got several thousand customers, and we've got a total addressable market in the UK of 25,000 businesses or 30-odd thousand businesses, maybe more like 40. You know, it's small. When you're dealing at that kind of scale, you can make a difference quickly, and you can see that difference quickly. When you're dealing in the scale of millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, and then when you get into billions, like the change doesn't come quickly. So measuring ROI can't come quickly either.
Wow, there's the difference. So, on the same wavelength, then, how do you measure if a social media initiative has failed? Because again, it's over time and all that. So, if after a year you look at it and say nothing changed, does that mean that it failed, or it was a bad time, or how do you deal with that?
So there's a few different ways to look at it, and that is the hardest thing, and you have to do a couple of things. First, you can't be attached to your babies. You've got to be ready to shoot them in the head, which is pretty hard. But you have to have that. You have to be super passionate about getting something off the ground, but then totally dispassionate about deciding if you're going to kill it. But then, how do you know if it's failed? Well, generally you don't look at like an ROI metric or return on marketing investment to know if it's failed. You look purely at is it actually attracting interest? Like if I'm running a blog as my activity, are people looking at it? Are people commenting on it? Are people sharing it? If I'm creating a whole series of videos, what's my view through rate? Like don't ever measure a video by how many views it got unless you're not putting any media money in. If you're putting media money in, which most big brands are nowadays, you have to measure view through, which is how many people actually watch the whole thing or most of the thing. Then but you look at those kind of metrics, and basically a campaign that failed just didn't do anything. It doesn't get tweeted about, it doesn't get shared, it doesn't get commented on, it doesn't get, the blog doesn't get looked at, and there are millions of these campaigns, and so you have to measure. Like what I always talk about is like, it's kind of like the Pareto's law, the 80-20 rule. You measure, like, that if you do 100 things, 20 of them will be really successful and 80 of them won't. And so, but what you have to do is when you're measuring your ROI, if you like, you've got to measure all 100. You've got to measure the impact, the success, and the failure of all 100, because that's what works. Otherwise, you just end up measuring the success and trying to eliminate the failure. You can never eliminate failure.
Right. So I just lost my train of thought. Give me a second.
No worries. So what I'm basically saying is, don't measure success and failure in isolation from each other. Like when you're running a series of initiatives, measure them side by side. So it's like I'll give you an example, right? I had 3 initiatives that I ran in the second half of 2013. I ran a really, really successful 3D printing project that generated millions of dollars of PR value and all sorts of good stuff. I ran a project to charge a phone with a bolt of lightning that again generated $250,000 of media value, or £250,000 of media value for a £20,000 investment. Really, really successful, lots and lots of shares, retweets, views, all the good things. And I did a project that was a billboard that changed colour depending on what the weather was. It was really cool because it was all about using your phone with gloves on, which Nokia's allowed you to do and other phones didn't.
That's right.
And that didn't do anything. Didn't get any off the ground at all. It didn't get any buzz. It was cool, but no one really cared. So when I'm measuring my impact at the end of the year, I didn't measure the 2 successful things and go, well, these were successful, and then measure the 3rd thing in isolation. They're all part of the same initiative and the same thought process and the same kind of end goal of disruption and generation of buzz and all that. So I measured them all together and said, I did 3 things, I spent this much money, and this is what I generated. Because you can't measure a single initiative, you have to measure them all together because they're all part of the same thing. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, and it reminded me. So by that logic, what you just said about disruption and buzz, Rebecca Black's Friday was a smashing success by every definition. Right? Like there's bad press, I mean, to a certain degree, if it got shares and all that. I mean,
there's 2 ways of looking at it. There is the whole, no publicity is bad publicity way of looking at it. And for part of my time at Nokia, I kind of really looked at that way. But it's more nuanced than that. You've got to look at the brand attributes you're trying to create. Like if your brand attribute you're trying to create is, you want to be seen as a rebel, then you're going to make a few enemies along the way. But the people who are going to buy your stuff are going to respect you for that. It is kind of like, if there are always going to be some people who are going to hate what you do because your product isn't right for those people. So who cares if those people say bad things about you? Like it's kind of like you can't make everyone happy. In fact, if you try to go down the road of like making everyone happy, you're just never going to do anything. You're never going to say anything. And that's why you can't be afraid of or switch off or get worried because of negativity. You just have to know the impact you're having on your core audience and your desired audience, and kind of screw everyone else.
To put it bluntly, that's right.
Yeah.
So the last thing I want to say, there's actually a lot more I want to say, but we're getting, last kind of part of the show here. How, when you're managing the Nokia pages and the Microsoft pages, how did you utilize, if at all, the Nokia fans or the Microsoft fans? I mean, could you argue those are sort of like free help, or like you said earlier, does that distraction from the core brand?
The fans were incredibly important to us in a whole lot of ways, and fans are always incredibly important because it's recommendation, but people need social proof. And if someone, like a real human being, maybe my friend, is telling me to buy something and that something is good, I'm more likely to buy it than if I even read a positive review of it on the internet, and that really matters. So sort of the way we would, if you like, use those people was to, as recommendation engines, people to recommend our product to others. What we wouldn't see them as is free help. And we couldn't see them as free help because it costs a hell of a lot of money to maintain those fans. It's not free because it literally is costing money. If we want to fly bloggers to an event, or if we want to do a fan giveaway, or if we want to do a fan discount or anything like that, that all costs money. It costs money to put it together, it costs opportunity of the time that it takes, and then it costs the money we spend to actually do it. So they're definitely not free. Building a strong and engaged fan base is actually incredibly expensive, but it's also, really, really important, because that's, in the long term, that's how you sell. If you've never heard of Net Promoter Score, I suggest looking that up. It's something that's really interesting and exciting, and it can very accurately predict the strength of a company in the long term by how many fans it has versus how many detractors it has.
Net Promoter Score?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll definitely
something that we looked at a lot within Microsoft.
All right. So to kind of jump away from that a little bit, what is it like to be part of the startup environment now that, again, you've been with Nokia and Microsoft for a while? What's it like to be in something fresh and new?
Good question. So it's really exciting. I think that's probably the one takeaway I'd have from it so far. I've only been doing it a couple of weeks, so it's still really early days. But it's the ability and the speed at which you can get things done. Doing something in a big company like a Nokia or Microsoft is incredibly rewarding when you get it done, but my God, it takes a long time to get it done. There are lots of layers of approval, there's lots of paperwork, there's lots of admin, there's lots of just getting things in a row, lots of politics, all that stuff. In a company of 50 people, just do it. And that's really exciting. And I think that kind of feeling of kind of coming together is really exciting, and really, it's really enjoyable. So you have then the downsides of you've got no money, you've got no brand equity, you're kind of like, it's a very different world in that respect, but I think that's offset by the fact that you have this, you can't react to a lot of things, but what you can react to, you can react to real fast and real well, and that's really good.
Great. Well, that's amazing. Now it is time for Ask David V. I ask questions, and you answer them. The answer to last question's episode, I make this mistake every single time I podcast. The answer to last episode's question, which was, how long have you been on social media? Let's look at the results, because the poll was pretty interesting. The options were less than a year, 1 to 3 years, 3 to 6 years, and more than 6 years. And out of the people that voted, about 25 of you or so, more than half of you, 56%, said more than 6 years on social. 20% of you said 3 to 6 years, 8% said 1 to 3 years, and 16% of you said less than a year. That's a lot more than I thought, to be honest. That's surprising. So you're hearing a lot of this stuff for the first time. Puts more pressure on me to make sure I'm doing an okay job. Well, anyway, the next question, that'll be this episode's question, will be, how many podcasts do you listen to regularly? The options will be 1, and hopefully that means this one, 2 to 3, 3 to 5, or more than 5. I will post a link to the poll today, some point, so you'll be able to respond before the week is out. Send me a tweet with the hashtag AskDavidV, and I'll send the link to you. The social network of the day is Beam. It came out relatively recently for iOS, and it's touted as the more authentic way to share and be social. So it's actually kind of interesting the way that it triggers. So it's sort of like Snapchat, I guess you could say, but the way you start recording is you hold your phone to your chest and block that so that it records whatever experience you're immediately viewing. And it's a very different way of doing social, because one thing is, when you start recording it and then you take it off your chest, or it stops or whatever, boom, it's gone. So that means you can't look at it beforehand. Like if you were to take out Snapchat and take a picture of yourself, you kind of look it over and make sure you look all right and all that before you send it out. But with Beam, you're recording, stopping, post it. There's no in-between stages, which is an interesting way to look at it. I don't know if this thing's going to take off. It's an invite only right now. And people that have it, I was lucky enough to get an invite. I think you can send out one invite per day or less than that. I don't know if you have an account. Anyway, the social network is called Beam. And the only other component to the social network really are called reactions. So let's say you follow someone, you can view their blasts or their beams or whatever they're calling them, and then you can react to it. And that's, if you tap the screen, it'll capture your face reacting to the broadcast. And that's the only feedback that people on Beam get. So there's no likes, there's no shares, there's no comments, there's reactions. And so really interesting social network. I'll be interested to see where this goes. It's not available on the web or Android or Windows right now. It is only for iOS. So if you have an iPhone or an iPad, you can give it a try. And assuming you have an invite. It's an invite-only service right now. So that's that. Let's take a trip to the app graveyard. These are the applications and services that are no longer with us. Today's dearly departed application is Emojily. Emojily was the emoji-only social network. I'm not kidding. You could not type text in this app. The only way you could communicate was using emoticons or smiley faces or whatever you want to call them. And I remember hearing about the social network and thinking it was totally silly. But nevertheless, I reserved my username, which was I was a little bird and a thumbs up. 2 reasons for that. The little bird kind of meant Twitter, and I thought that would be good. And the thumbs up, I just like the thumbs up emoticon. It's one of my favorite ones. And that was my username, 2 little emoticons. And it finally came out after a while before it was published. I signed up with my username, and I used it for like 2 seconds, and I was like, this doesn't make any sense. I can't get a message across. No one's on this thing. I don't even know what it's for, and left it. Then I got an email about a few weeks ago, I want to say, maybe a few months ago, and they said, hey, we're shutting down Emojily. And I was like, oh yeah, Emojily. That was a social network, wasn't it? Oh well. All right, so now we are on to immature impersonations. They might be good, they might be bad, but they are certainly immature. And for today's impersonation, I'm going to do Goofy from Mickey Mouse. Haven't tried this one yet. Let's just go for it and see what happens. Trying to find it. Well, hi there, Mickey. Gosh. Ooh, that was a little rough. Man, I really compromise a lot of my dignity when I do these impersonations, but that's okay. Because you know what? I do it for the lulz, as they say. So, by the way, if you have an impersonation that you'd want me to try, please message me. Go to beyondtweeting.com/contact and say, David, I want you to impersonate this, or as far as any other comments you have about the show. I'd love to hear them. That is just about all the time we have for this episode of the Beyond Tweeting podcast. I want to thank Tom again for being here. He had a dip, but he was a great guest and brought a lot of insight into social media marketing in a variety and digital in general. And he touched on something really good, that social media is a part of something bigger, and that's digital. And we're calling it social media right now, but who knows what it will become later in the future. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, for downloading, for subscribing, for sharing, and obviously for watching this podcast. For all things Beyond Tweeting, please go to beyondtweeting.com. To subscribe, you can search Beyond Tweeting in your favorite podcast application, or go to beyondtweeting.com/subscribe. If a show's going on right now, which it is, You can watch it live at beyondtweeting.com/live. And because Tom had to leave, it's up to me to say the anticlimactic line. That quarter has dust on it.